end of an era, Hillary Clinton confirms for the first time she is not running for president in 2020. Hillary Clinton has officially ruled out running for president in 2020. The former presidential candidate confirmed it for the first time in an interview with News 12 Westchester on Monday night. "I'm not running, but I'm going to keep on working and speaking and standing up for what I believe," Clinton said. Despite ruling out a presidential bid, Clinton said she is not going anywhere when it comes to speaking out about politics. "I want to be sure that people understand I'm going to keep speaking out. I'm not going anywhere," she said. "What's at stake in our country, the kind of things that are happening right now are deeply troubling to me. And I'm also thinking hard about how do we start talking and listening to each other again? We've just gotten so polarized. We've gotten into really opposing camps unlike anything I have ever seen in my adult life." Clinton, who lost the 2016 presidential election to Donald Trump, said she plans to take on an active role in the Democratic Party in the lead-up to the next election. The former Secretary of State has already met with some of the 2020 candidates and offered up advice to not take anything for granted. "I've told every one of them, don't take anything for granted, even though we have a long list of real problems and broken promises from this administration that need to be highlighted," she said. "People need to understand that in many cases, they were sold a bill of goods. We can't take anything for granted. We have to work really, really hard to make our case to the American people, and I'm gonna do everything I can to help the Democrats win back the White House." Clinton also ruled out running for elected office again, including New York governor or mayor. "I don't think so, but I love living in New York and I'm so grateful that I had the chance to be a senator for 8 years and to work with people across our state," she said. "I care deeply about the future of New York and so, again, I'm gonna do what I can to help support candidates and causes that I think are continuing to make New York a better and better place." Everyone and everything Hillary Clinton has blamed for losing the election, 43 and counting. Clinton is furious that Comey, then the FBI director, publicly revealed the reopening of the secret email server investigation just before Election Day, and has said so time after time after time. Comey's entire organization does not escape her wrath. The FBI wasn't the Federal Bureau of Ifs or Innuendos. Its job was to find out the facts, she writes in What Happened. "There's no doubt in my mind that Putin wanted me to lose and wanted Trump to win," she told USA Today in September last year while promoting What Happened. "It was hardly a new theme. As early as December, the New York Times obtained audio in which she told her donors, Putin publicly blamed me for the outpouring of outrage by his own people, and that is the direct line between what he said back then and what he did in this election. Putin's entire apparatus gets a name check. In May she told the Codicton Convention how 1,000 Russian agents had filled Facebook with fake news. She told NPR my path toward November was being disrupted with Russians. WikiLeaks. The Transparency website is consistently ranked along with Comey by Clinton at the top of her blame list. She told NPR, "Unfortunately, the Comey letter, aided to great measure by the Russian WikiLeaks, raised all those doubts again." And she writes of its founder Julian Assange and what happened. "In my view, Assange is a hypocrite who deserves to be held accountable for his actions. You put yourself in the position of a low-information voter, and all of a sudden your Facebook feed, your Twitter account is saying, 'Oh my gosh, Hillary Clinton is running a child trafficking operation in Washington with John Podesta.'" She told the Code Convention in May. "Well, you don't believe it, but this has been such an unbelievable election, you kind of go, oh, maybe I better look into that. We have an electoral college problem. It's an anachronism," she told Vox. "I think it's important that we learn the real lessons from this last campaign because the forces that we are up against are not just interested in influencing our elections and our politics, they're going after our economy and they're going after our unity as a nation," she told Code in May. What is hard for people to really accept, although now after the election there's greater understanding, is that there are forces in our country, put the Russians to one side, who have been fighting rearguard actions for as long as I've been alive because my life coincided with the civil rights movement, with the women's rights movement, with anti-war protesting, with the impeachment. Everyone WHO assumed SHE would win. I was the victim of a very broad assumption that I was going to win, she told the Code Convention. Clinton says polls in key states did not serve her. "I think polling is going to have to undergo some revisions in how they actually measure people," she told the Code Convention. "How they reach people. The best assessments as of right now are that the polling was not that inaccurate, but it was predominantly national polling and I won nationally." Clinton has two beefs with Obama, one of them being that he won 2 terms. Clinton says that succeeding an incumbent is almost impossible for a Democrat. No non-incumbent Democrat had run successfully to succeed another 2-termer since Vice President Martin Van Buren won in 1836, she writes in What Happened. But she also says his response to the Russian campaign of interference wasn't enough. "I do wonder sometimes about what would have happened if President Obama had made a televised address to the nation in the fall of 2016 warning that our democracy was under attack," she writes in What Happened. "I believe absent Comey, I might have picked up 1 or 2 points among white women," she told Vox in September. "Are really quite politically dependent on their view of their own security and their own position in society, what works and doesn't work for them. What happened in my election is I was on the way to winning white women until former director of the FBI Jim Comey dropped that very ill-advised letter on October the 28th and my numbers just went down," she said in a March 2018 speech in India. "All of a sudden white women who were going to vote for me, and frankly standing up to the men in their lives and the men in their workplaces were being told, 'She's going to jail, you don't want to vote for her. It's going to be terrible, you can't vote for that.' It stopped my momentum and it decreased my vote enough. Because I was ahead and I was winning and I thought I had fought my way back." The New York Times. The newspaper was blamed as early as May at the Codicton conference in Rancho Palos Verdes, California. She singled out its managing editor Dean Baquet, the paper's most senior editor, and said of coverage of her email issue under his direction, they covered it like it was Pearl Harbor. Biden could have run against her and didn't. But Clinton writes, Joe Biden said the Democratic Party in 2016 did not talk about what it always stood for, and that was how to maintain a burgeoning middle class. I find this fairly remarkable, considering that Joe himself campaigned for me all over the Midwest and talked plenty about the middle class. His attacks caused lasting damage, making it harder to unify progressives in the general election and paving the way for Trump's crooked Hillary campaign, she writes in What Happened. I don't know if that bothered Bernie or not. Some of his supporters, the so-called Bernie brothers, took to harassing my supporters online. It got ugly and more than a little sexist, she writes in What Happened. I thought, at end of day, people would say, look, we do want change, and we want the right kind of change, and we want change that is realistic and is going to make difference in my life and my family's life and my paycheck, she told Vox. That's what I was offering. And I didn't in any way want to feed into this, not just radical political argument that was being made on either side, but very negative cultural argument about who we are as Americans. Misogynists. Asked by CNN's Christina Amanpour at the Women for Women International event in New York in May if misogyny was to blame, she said, yes, I do think it played a role. When you have a presidential campaign and the total number of minutes on TV news, which is still how most people get their information, covering all of our policies, climate change, anything else was 32 minutes, I don't blame voters, she told The View. They don't get a broad base of information to make decision on. The more outrageous you are, the more inflammatory you are, the higher the ratings are. Netflix. Hillary does not do Netflix and chill, or if she does, she doesn't find it very relaxing. 8 of the top 10 political documentaries on Netflix were screeds against President Obama and me, she claimed at the Codicton convention. Facebook. If you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. They were connected to, as we now know, the 1,000 Russian agents who were involved in delivering those messages, she told Codicton. Twitter. Usually mentioned in the same breath as Facebook, the microblogging site is seen by Clinton as one of the reasons for her loss. She told the Codicton convention in May that Trump had a method in his tweets. They want to influence your reality. That to me is what we're up against, and we can't let that go unanswered, she said. Content farms in Macedonia. Through content farms, through an enormous investment in falsehoods, fake news, call it what you will, lies. That's a good word too, the other side was using content that was flat out false, she told the Codicton convention in May. They were conveying this weaponized information and the content of it, and they were running, there's all these stories, about and you know I've seen them now, and you sit there and it looks like you know sort of low-level CNN operation, or a fake newspaper. You had Citizens United come to its full fruition. She told Codicton in May. So unaccountable money flowing in against me, against other Democrats, in a way that we hadn't seen, and then attached to this weaponized information war. American journalists who eagerly and uncritically repeated whatever WikiLeaks dished out during the campaign could learn from the responsible way the French press handled the hack of Macron, she writes in What Happened. Now President Macron had a massive tranche of his emails hacked and released shortly before the French voted. Many outlets did not report on their contents. Steve Bannon and Breitbart provided the untrue stories, she told the Codicton convention in May. I set up my campaign and we have our own data operation. I get the nomination. So I'm now the nominee of the Democratic Party. I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party, Clinton told the Codicton convention in May. I mean, it was bankrupt. It was on the verge of insolvency. Its data was mediocre to poor, non-existent, wrong. I had to inject money into it. The Republicans were far better prepared for a campaign than the Democrats, she claimed, when it came to money and data, telling the Codicton convention. So Trump becomes the nominee and he is basically handed this tried and true, effective foundation. The data targeting firm ultimately owned by Robert Mercer, the billionaire Breitbart backer, and his family, is said to have targeted voters to drive them away from Clinton. They ultimately added something, and I think again we'd better understand that. The Mercers did not invest all that money for their own amusement, she told the Codicton convention. The massive demonstrations in Washington and other cities in the wake of the election were organized as an immediate response to Clinton's shock defeat. But that did not stop Clinton from writing in What Happened, I couldn't help but ask where those feelings of solidarity, outrage and passion had been during the election. The NBC Today show anchor quizzed both candidates at a Commander-in-Chief forum on board Intrepid in New York. Clinton, who went first in the back-to-back interviews, complained about Lauer focusing on her secret server and whether it raised questions over her trustworthiness. Lauer had turned what should have been a serious discussion into a pointless ambush. What a waste of time, she writes in What Happened. He later delighted in his firing for sexual misconduct, saying in December, "Every day I believe more in karma." White voters have been fleeing the Democratic Party ever since Lyndon Johnson predicted they would, she told Vox. "We're not making the documentaries that we're going to get onto Netflix," she told Codicton. She was asked by the interviewer, "This is because Hollywood isn't liberal enough?" "No, it's because Democrats aren't putting their money there," she replied. The attacks on the U.S. diplomatic compound in the Libyan city of Benghazi on September 11, 2012, happened when Clinton was Secretary of State. It claimed 4 American lives, and was the focus of intense investigation by Congress. Clinton told the Today Show, "Take the Benghazi tragedy, you know, I have one of the top Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, admitting we're going to take that tragedy, because, you know, we've lost people, unfortunately, going back to the Reagan administration, if you talk about recent times, in diplomatic attacks. But boy, it was turned into a political football. And it was aimed at undermining my credibility, my record, my accomplishments. Suppressing her voters was named by Clinton as one of the major factors in her defeat in her interview on the Today Show when she rattled off her laundry list. "What was at work here?" she said. "In addition to the mistakes that I made, which I recount in the book, what about endemic sexism and misogyny, not just in politics but in our society? What about the unprecedented action of the FBI director? What about the interference of an adversary nation? What about voter suppression? Was a return to a theme." She suggested it was a problem in Wisconsin in an interview in May with New York Magazine. "Have won had I not been subjected to the unprecedented attacks by Comey and the Russians, aided and abetted by the suppression of the vote, particularly in Wisconsin," she said. "Republicans learned that if you suppress votes you win." Senate Majority Leader is accused of stopping the Obama administration from revealing what Clinton says the Russians were up to, helping tip the balance against her because he did not want a third successive Democratic term in the White House. McConnell, in what I think of as a not only unpatriotic but despicable act of partisan politics, made it clear that if the Obama administration spoke publicly about what they knew on Russia, he would accuse them of partisan politics, of trying to tip the balance toward me, she told The New Yorker. Then claims the Supreme Court watered down the Voting Rights Act at the Covington Convention. "You had effective suppression of votes," she said.